Welcome to 10 Minutes a Day, a daily reading of the Catholic Church's social encyclicals. Today we continue with Pacem and Terris, written by Pope John XXIII in 1963. Today, on the contrary, the conviction is widespread that all men are equal in natural dignity, and so, on the doctrinal and theoretical level at least, no form of approval is being given to racial discrimination. All this is of supreme significance for the formation of a human society animated by the principles we have mentioned above. For man's awareness of his rights must inevitably lead him to the recognition of his duties. The possession of rights involves the duty of implementing those rights, for they are the expression of a man's personal dignity. And the possession of rights also involves their recognition and respect by others. When society is formed on the basis of rights and duties, men have an immediate grasp of spiritual and intellectual values, and have no difficulty in understanding what is meant by truth, justice, charity, and freedom. They become, moreover, conscious of being members of such a society. And that is not all. Inspired by such principles, they attain to a better knowledge of the true God, a personal God transcending human nature. They recognize that their relationship with God forms the very foundation of their life, the interior life of the Spirit, and the life which they live in the society of their fellows. Section 2. Relations between individuals and the public authorities. Human society can neither be well ordered nor prosperous without the presence of those who, invested with legal authority, preserve its institutions and do all that is necessary to sponsor actively the interests of all its members. And they derive their authority from God, for, as St. Paul teaches, there is no power but from God. In his commentary on this passage, St. John XXIII writes, "What are you saying? Is every ruler appointed by God? No, that is not what I mean," he says, "for I am not now talking about individual rulers, but about authority as such. My contention is that the existence of a ruling authority, the fact that some should command and others obey, that all things not come about by the result of blind chance, this is a provision of divine wisdom. God has created men social by nature, and a society cannot hold together unless someone is in command to give effective direction and unity of purpose. Hence, every civilized community must have a ruling authority, and this authority, no less than society itself, has a source in nature, and consequently has God for its author. But it must not be imagined that authority knows no bounds. Since its starting point is the permission is to govern in accordance with right reason, there is no escaping the conclusion that derives its binding force from the moral order, which in turn has God as its origin and end. Hence, to quote Pope Pius XII, the absolute order of living beings, the very purpose of man, an autonomous being, the subject of duties and inviolable rights, and the origin and purpose of human society, have a direct bearing upon the state as a necessary community endowed with authority. Divested of this authority, and it is nothing, it is lifeless. But right reason, and above all Christian faith, make it clear that such an order can have no other origin but in God, a personal God, our Creator. Hence it is from Him the state officials derive their dignity, for they share, to some extent, in the authority of God Himself. Hence, a regime which governs solely or mainly by means of threats and intimidation or promises of reward provides men with no effective incentive to work for the common good. And even if it did, it would certainly be offensive to the dignity of free and rational beings. Authority is before all else a moral force. For this reason, the appeal of rulers should be to the individual conscience, to the duty which every man has of voluntarily contributing to the common good. But since all men are equal in natural dignity, for this reason, the appeal of rulers should be to the individual conscience, to the duty which every man has of voluntarily contributing to the common good. But since all men are equal in natural dignity, no man has the capacity to force eternal compliance on another. Only God can do that, for he alone scrutinizes and judges the secret counsels of the heart. Hence, representatives of the state have no power to bind men in conscience, unless their own authority is tied to God's authority and is a participation in it. The application of this principle likewise safeguards the dignity of citizens. Their obedience to civil authorities is never an obedience paid to them as men. It is in reality an act of homage paid to God, the provident creator of the universe, who has decreed that men's dealings with one another be regulated in accordance with that order which he himself has established. And we men do not demean ourselves in showing due reverence to God. On the contrary, we are lifted up and ennobled in spirit, for to serve God is to reign. Governmental authority, therefore, is a postulate of the moral order and derives from God. Consequently, laws and decrees passed in contravention of the moral order, and hence of the divine will, can have no binding force in conscience, since it is right to obey God rather than men. Indeed, the passing of such laws undermines the very nature of authority and results in shameful abuse. As St. Thomas teaches, in regard to the second proposition, we maintain that human law has the rationale of law insofar as it is in accordance with right reason, and as such it obviously derives from eternal law. A law which is at variance with reason is to that extent unjust and no longer has the rationale of law. It is rather an act of violence. The fact that authority comes from God does not mean that men have no power to choose those who are to rule the state, or to decide upon the type of government they want, and determine the procedure and limitations of rulers and the exercise of their authority. Hence, the above teaching is consonant with any genuinely democratic form of government. Men, both as individuals and as intermediate groups, are required to make their own specific contributions to the general welfare. The main consequence of this is that they must harmonize their own interests with the needs of others, and offer their goods and services as their rulers shall direct, assuming, of course, that justice is maintained and the authorities are acting within the limits of their competence. Those who have authority in the state must exercise that authority in a way which is not only morally irreproachable, but also best calculated to ensure or promote the state's welfare. The attainment of the common good is the sole reason for the existence of civil authorities. In working for the common good, therefore, the authorities must obviously respect its nature, and at the same time adjust their legislation to meet the requirements of the given situation. Among the essential elements of the common good, one must certainly include the various characteristics distinctive of each individual people, but these by no means constitute the whole of it. For the common good, since it is intimately bound up with human nature, can never exist fully and completely unless the human person is taken into account at all times. Thus, attention must be paid to the basic nature of the common good and what it is that brings it about. We must add, therefore, that it is the nature of the common good that every single citizen has the right to share in it, although in different ways depending on his tasks, merits, and circumstances. Hence, every civil authority must strive to promote the common good in the interest of all, without favoring any individual citizen or category of citizen. As Pope Leo XIII insisted, the civil power must not be subservient to the advantage of any one individual, or of some few persons, inasmuch as it was established for the common good of all. Nevertheless, considerations of justice and equity can at times demand that those in power pay more attention to the weaker members of society, since these are at a disadvantage when it comes to defending their own rights and asserting their legitimate interests. In this connection, we would draw our attention of our sons to the fact that the common good is something which affects the needs of the whole man, body, and soul. That then is the sort of good which rulers of states must take suitable measures to ensure. They must respect the hierarchy of values and aim at achieving the spiritual as well as the material prosperity of their subjects. These principles are clearly contained in that passage in our encyclical Mater et Magistra, where we emphasize that the common good must take account of those social conditions which favor the full development of human personality. Consisting as he does of body and immortal soul, man cannot in this mortal life satisfy his needs or attain perfect happiness. Thus, the measures that are taken to implement the common good must not jeopardize his eternal salvation. Indeed, they must even help him to obtain it.